All right, well, I think we're going to get started. I hope that everyone can hear me. We have a nice, small, intimate group here. You're obviously here to talk about biometry and IOL calculations, and the device that perhaps maybe has not had as much press out there, but I think has some really unique features. And I don't know, Mike, how long have we had the ALADDIN for? How long have we had it for? 3, 4? I don't know how long we've had it for. 2 years? I thought it was at least 2 years. Yeah, yeah. And we have a very busy cataract practice. Just by disclosure, we've had IOL Master 500, 700, LensStar, NIDEC, and ALADDIN in our practices. We currently use the ALADDIN in one of our sites, and we use the 700 in the other site, and that's kind of what our current distribution is. So I'm just curious, by folks that are here, what are you currently using for your biometry? 500? LensStar? 500, okay. And topography? ISIS? Okay, so Atlas, okay, yeah. So everyone's using some form of biometry and some form of topography, and I think we'd all agree. I mean, I think we're not doing too bad. I mean, I think we're doing reasonably well. But I think that for me, and I do consult with a lot of companies, including the ones that make other manufacturers as well, so I'll pass on that. So, I mean, I think we're obviously way past the point about understanding the value of optical biometry, and it's becoming more important as far as what else can my biometer do, both in terms of functionality as well as what's on board. The automation is important as well. So, I mean, I think that's where the differentiating features are between the different biometers. And I always rely on our tech team. They do all our biometry to give me feedback in terms of how laborious or how difficult in the workflow that's present in using biometers. And so, different biometers have different technologies. This is optical low coherence interferometry, which is different, a little bit different than partial coherence, and different than swept source. And one of the unique things about this device is the attachment, so to speak, and integration with the topography system, which basically creates an all-in-one unit. And I think that one thing I've been really impressed with ALADDIN, somehow they've been able to incorporate the latest and greatest formulas on board. I mean, we have the 700, we have the Barrett on board, but it's not really well integrated in terms of the toric calculator, for example, in terms of how we functionally use it, as an example. So, but ALADDIN, I think, has really been able to incorporate these formulas really well. And for us, that's really important in terms of allowing us to integrate really well. We have a very digital office. I don't know how much, most of you probably are using some sort of electronic system or imaging system. And I think that the ability of this unit to be fully compatible into PACS and imaging systems and DICOM network is important. So I think every device needs to be able to achieve this, and this is that matter. So these are the 9 functions that are present. There are some more little things that are present, but axial length, keratometry, AC depth, CCT, lens thickness, corneal topography, wavefront, pupillometry, and corneal white to white. I can tell you that, I mean, obviously we use these things regularly, but I use the rest of this stuff routinely. Some of this stuff is for formulas. I really like looking at the corneal wavefront. I do rely on the pupil. I do look at angle kappa. I do look at these parameters in terms of IOL selection as well as counseling as well. So, one of the things, of course, that we look at is what structures are important to measure and where are we measuring. And I think that we're at the point now where using 2 variable formulas is outdated. And if you look at some of the recent publications, the really good publications by Mellison Group in Ophthalmology 2018, clearly shows the value of using a multi-formula, variable formula compared to 2 variable formulas for all axial lengths. If you're doing, every patient you do is a 23 millimeter eye with an average 43K with an average AC depth and lens thickness, you're probably going to be fine using Holiday 1, SRK, classical formulas. But anything more than that, I think those are where we really want to shine. We need to have more variables, and I think that's what's important. The 500 we loved, but even the AC depth we know is measuring a slit beam measurement. it's not true central AC depth and is highly prone to technical variability. So relying on the AC depth for using old technology and not using interferometry here, as this device does, is an issue. You know, we get a lot of values printed out here between both eyes, everything in front of you here. That's relevant to knowing the patient. There's a few pages I'll show you in terms of how it's reported, but it really gives us everything at our fingertips that we want to know for the given patient. Now, one of the big questions are, of course, you know, the industry standards are, no question, this AAO Master family of devices and biometers has been the industry standard. LensStar has become the industry standard. Between the two of them, those have been the industry standard. For anything to be used in an office, we want to make sure that we're at least industry standard or better. So, you know, I was fortunate to review a number of these papers, looking at interoperator repeatability and reliability, reproducibility. Again, excellent values in correlation and excellent values in repeatability. So I can be reassured that the reproducibility is excellent. And we did this in our own office when we looked at this. Comparing, for example, the AAO Master, the ALADDIN, and looking at comparisons of different measurements here, showing again excellent agreement and repeatability by very well-known clinicians that are out there. And then again, looking at LensStar, again, looking at excellent reliability and interchangeability. So of course you look at that and say, well, then why don't I just get a LensStar? Why don't I just get a 500, or sorry, an AAO Master 700? And it's a very good question. It's because a biometer is, again, more than simply just doing the measurements. It's what goes beyond doing the actual measurements. But it has to start with reproducibility, repeatability, and comparative agreements. So I feel reassured. We did a number of patients on different biometers in our office. We found the same thing as far as reproducibility. So we interchange them all the time. We have really no concern about interchanging them, and I think the studies back us up by that. What's obviously really nice, and again, workflow is important. We do a lot of surgery in our practice with multiple surgeons, multiple formulas, multiple you know, hospitals that we work at and surgical centers, is to have things done efficiently in the office. And this topography device competes with anything out there in terms of a placido disc technology, which, you know, for us is the gold standard in terms of looking at the ocular surface as well as looking at the anterior cornea. And measuring, of course, and differentiating patients with astigmatism, even if they're not going to be a toric patient, knowing they have irregular astigmatism, or looking at it, diagnosing dry eye and ocular surface issues before doing biometry, all very important to look at. I do like looking at aberrations for lens selection. I like using it for counseling patients for expectations in terms of what to expect. And I use that along with pupil size to tell me how relevant those corneal aberrations will be. This is, again, just a screenshot of what we see here. All the typical you know, customizations are available in terms of what you'd like to see, what kind of scale, tangential and axial curvature maps of the cornea, and again, looking at all the parameters. Some of these parameters, of course, looking at the average you know, corneal power within the pupil can be looked at. Looking at the photopic pupil and decentration are again potentially valuable as well, and comparing to mesopic as well in terms of certainly some lens selection. So again, just to show you what these printouts look at. Screenshot. This is the printout here. You can see this is like the second page printout, so to speak, of the ALADDIN. Again, the typical biometric summaries here, looking at the keratometric values. You know, I'm not a cornea specialist, but our cornea guys, of course, will use this as well for corneal issues as well. I like looking at the pupil size. I like looking at the pupil data in terms of centration as well as pupil size. I do think it plays some role in terms of the impact of corneal aberrations and visual results. I do look at it as playing a role for multifocal lenses and the potential for decentration of multifocal lenses. And so I do look at some of these things like coma and spherical aberration particularly when I look at my topography. So again, most of you are doing topography. The ability to have it all together with a device, of course, with a couple of clicks is certainly valuable. So I don't know how many of you look at corneal aberration and spherical aberration for lens selection. I like looking at this, for example. to identify patients that may have had previous LASIK. A lot of times people have had previous refractive surgery. They don't tell us this, and we get fooled. I like looking at asphericity and looking at the spherical aberration and the corneal topography to tell us what may be going on. But for many patients, what their other value is lens selection. So I am one to look at corneal aberrations that potentially match the IOL asphericity. Someone has a lot of positive spherical aberration, they may be getting more of a Technis lens, for example. Someone with a medium amount that may be going more Alcon. Someone who has more neutral or even negative spherical aberration, like a hyperopic LASIK patient, I may be going more toward an AO lens, like a B&L lens. And particularly based on pupil size, this might be valuable. As I said before, looking at this again from a multifocal perspective is important as well. Someone with a lot of vertical coma, you know, I would be suspicious and concerned about their visual quality. I counsel that patient, particularly for multifocal lenses. So we talked a little bit about IOL formula, and all the classics are available, but the integration of the post-refractive calculator here, as well as the toric IOL calculator, and as well as some of the latest generation IOL formula, I think is really a nice package. We like having everything automated. There's no re-entering data on a website. Everything's all automated, and the printouts are customizable in what we like to use. So for me, the Barrett still is the king of formulas. To get good Barrett results, though, we need to get good AC depth measurements and lens thickness measurements and white to white, and that's where it's important. Now, the Barrett formula is more than just the Barrett Universal 2. The True K for refractive surgery is quite good. You know, I still do use the ASCRS calculator. I'm sure many of you do for post-refractive eyes. But this actually has a number of post-refractive formulas on there, which reduces the need to use the website. There's always an issue with transferring data on a website, which can result in errors. But the True K toric calculator we all know of, but the RX formula is really nice for those patients that have refractive surprises. Residual cylinder after a toric lens that may be rotated. A patient who may have a refractive surprise. I really recommend using the Barrett RX, and it's on board here, to provide recommendations for rotating lenses or for exchanging or piggyback lenses. I think the real way to do this. Again, we said all these values are entered, of course, with the Barrett. You know, we need to have beyond just the AL and Ks, AC depth, lens thickness, horizontal white to white, all need to be entered. And that's the big holy grail, which is the ELP. And the Universal 2, of course, in our opinion, certainly has been the tops. And if you look at, again, the latest publications, like I said, Mellus Ophthalmology 2018, we see that the Barrett shines amongst all ranges of eyes and axial lens. So very useful, but you just see the different tabs can be selected based on what you need. And our techs are trained to do this. Toric calculator, again, very intuitive. We know this as well. I'm sure most of you using the Barrett toric calculator. And that's what we still find that the Barrett nomogram provides us with the most generalizable toric correction. You know, as an aside, we do have a pentacam. We do look at pentacam for direct true net power. I think we're still evaluating the differences here, but I do, at this point in time, rely on the Barrett for those formulas. And, you know, standard printout here, giving us a selective spherical equivalent and showing you, what's very nice, all the ranges of the toric powers that may be available for this patient and giving you the residual cylinder amount. So you can, as a surgeon, then pick what you want. Do you want to leave the patient with some cylinder? Maybe it's a really young patient. You want to leave them with the rule. You can pick what you have, and it'll give you a recommendation based on residual. And it'll give you the recommended with the least amount, a T5 here, as an example. The True K formula, as I said, previous myopic or previous hyperopic LASIK patients can be used with the True K formula. And again, we like to use the value for this. So this is a myopic LASIK patient. It's a hyperopic LASIK patient, and you can see integration of the Barrett True K spitting out the actual value. And I think, again, I like to look at the topography to ensure I'm actually entering a patient that has a myopic LASIK patient. This is the growing issue. Of patients who've had previous refractive surgery that have not reported to their physicians. And I do like looking at topography to tell me what's going on. I'm sure many of you do this as well. The Barrett RX, again, as I said, I love this because I have a particular interest in dealing with IOL, unexpected IOL outcomes. Hopefully not my own, but referred in, who may need a lens exchange or piggyback or rotation. And the RX formula works beautifully on board to give you the recommendation as far as what to do. For example, a patient who has residual cylinder with a known lens power, a known lens toric power with a known axis, it'll tell us rotate the lens and how much to rotate and what the residual cylinder will be, and the residual sphere as well, and tell us what axis we need to be at. So very handy to use. Don't go back and just simply rotate the lens back to where it was originally supposed to be at. Take advantage of the refraction, which will give you the better measurement as far as exactly what you need to do, because maybe the lens may not be rotated as much based on what the now refractive measurements are going to be. So always go back and run refractive versions formula or the Barrett RX formula to do that at a more accurate level. So Doug Koch really has probably really been the one that's been instrumental in talking about posterior cornea, and both Abulafia and Doug Koch have both put together their nomogram, which is also based on the posterior cornea nomogram. Not too different, I think, than what Barrett has tried to do, but basically using this predicted residual astigmatism to basically provide a correction for that. And so the Abulafia formula is a similar idea, basically incorporating a nomogram on what the expected posterior corneal cylinder will be to tell you what the total net corneal power will be. So this is integrated in there in terms of the IOL calculation. And basically, if you click on the Abulafia Koch correction, you will get that incorporated into your printout, which is shown here. So here's an example of the toric IOL selection without the Abulafia Koch formula and with. And the difference you can see in terms of what's picked, a 225 for someone with against the rule versus 300 as expected. Correcting for posterior cylinder provides this. Now, here's an example of the same patient that had a Barrett. You may ask yourself, well, if you have a Barrett on board, why do you need to have the Abulafia Koch correction in there? I think it's a personal choice. The advantage of the Abulafia Koch correction is you can use another formula. Let's say you prefer to use a Haggis or you prefer to use a Holiday formula, but you want to still correct a posterior cylinder. Then you can use the Abulafia Koch correction with that formula. But if you're using Barrett all the way through for your spherical equivalent, then you can use the Barrett. You don't need to do that correction because it's already built in. So one of my partners really likes, I like the Barrett. One of my partners likes another formula. Well, she basically would say, they're going to go back and say, I prefer to use SRKT, whatever, right? Maybe in a longer eye. Well, then you can simply click the Abulafia Koch correction and get it done built in there. So you don't have to worry about, or not worry, we don't have to use the Barrett formula necessarily. That's why that's on board, and it depends on what you want to choose. So a lot of information is here, in terms of the print. This is the Barrett Universal 2. All the parameters are here, IOL picked, and you can see on the topography, all the values are present that you need. And you can obviously compare. You can compare the cylinder based on the optical biometry, and you can compare it based on the corneal cylinder as well. So here's an example where we have the result here, in terms of what the Barrett would predict. So this was a Hoffer Q that was used with this, just to give you examples how you can customize and choose what IOL formula to use and whether to make a correction based on the Barrett or on the Abulafia Koch correction. How many use the Olsen formula? Because the Olsen formula is not as popular, but really is probably one of the best formulas we have found, particularly for shorter eyes. And the Olsen suite basically is a very I wouldn't say novel because it's been around for some time, but a really visionary way to predict ELP. And what Thomas Olsen did basically was use Zmax and looking at astronomic telescopes and how images are gathered with those systems and camera lenses to basically incorporate this into a proper lens formula. And basically, the C constant essentially is you can think of it as essentially where the lens is going to sit in a collapsed capsular bag, using thick lens optics, so to speak. So, you know, most of our formulas basically collapse the cornea and the IOL to one plane, the principal plane. Those are thin lens optics, right? But we know the cornea has a thickness, and the lens has a thickness. That's gonna cause some refraction of light. We think it's small, but particularly for complex eyes, thinking of the anterior and posterior curvature of the cornea and the IOL may be able to provide more accuracy, particularly for post-LASIK patients. So this is basically a true ray tracing formula. And the Olsen formula now is built in as a calculator for these eyes. I think it is one of the top formulas in my opinion. And again, like I said, particularly for smaller eyes. And again, incorporating a toric calculator in this as well, and providing the right spherical power is what's useful. So I know many of my colleagues, the Olsen is still not something that's widely used, but I think now that it's available on the platform, I'm going to recommend to think about using it or looking at it at least, and looking at your own results and saying what would have predicted more valuable. But for me, between the Barrett and the Olsen is where I've been going with my formulas. Some of you may be asking, well, wait a minute, what about the Hill RBF, right? A lot of noise on Hill RBF. I think the Hill RBF is a very good formula. Certainly with the Lens Star, it's built in, it's available on the website. In our experience, the Barrett and the Olsen seem to perform just as well as the RBF. We'll see what the future shows on that. But of course, if I'm really worried, I can still enter the RBF online if I need to. So that's typically how we use our different formulas. So I hope I've been able to kind of just go over some of the functionality, where we use it, the confidence of using it. You know, using it now for 2 years and comparing our patients and results. It's really been a workhorse for us and adopted very well with our practice. So those are my comments, but maybe happy to take any questions or any comments as far as ALADDIN or other biometers or topography. Thank you very much.